You're coming with me, now!
Ah! My leg! What are you doing?
You don't get to question me!
You can't do this! These are my rights!
Rights? Not in my hallway!
You'll regret this.
He thought she was just another nobody in the courthouse hallway. Officer Harlan Voss, fueled by a dangerous cocktail of a badge, a bruised ego, and deep-seated prejudice, decided to assert his dominance the only way he knew how. With cruelty, he kicked her, threw a slur disguised as a sneer, and walked away laughing, thinking he was untouchable. He didn't know the quiet black woman taking notes on the floor wasn't a defendant, a victim, or a bystander. She was his absolute worst nightmare. Stick around, because the moment the precinct doors swing open for the new chief of police, a reckoning begins that will leave you breathless. The air inside the Monroe County Courthouse always smelled faintly of floor wax, stale coffee, and quiet desperation. It was a humid, suffocating day that made tempers run short before the sun even fully crested the skyline. Officer Harlan Voss of the Oak Ridge Police Department loved the courthouse. To him, it was a stage, and he was the undisputed star. He had built a reputation not for stellar detective work or community service, but for being a hardliner. In the break room, the other officers called him old school. On the streets, the community called him a menace. Voss operated on a simple, flawed philosophy. Fear was respect, and the badge he wore on his chest was a license to do whatever he deemed necessary to maintain it. He walked with a heavy, deliberate thud, his utility belt creaking, his thumbs hooked casually into his vest. He had just finished testifying in a minor possession case, successfully lying on the stand about probable cause to ensure a conviction. The judge hadn't questioned him. They rarely did. High on the adrenaline of his own fabricated authority, Voss pushed through the heavy oak doors of courtroom 3B and stepped into the crowded, echoing hallway. The quarter was packed with public defenders, nervous defendants, and exhausted families. Every wooden bench was full. Voss hated the crowd. He hated the noise. But most of all, he hated feeling inconvenienced. He needed to get to the clerk's office at the far end of the hall to sign some paperwork before his shift officially ended, and a line of people spilling out from the traffic court was blocking his direct path. Sitting on the edge of a bench, right in his trajectory, was a black woman. She appeared to be in her middle years, dressed sharply, but unassumingly in a beige trench coat over a dark navy turtleneck and tailored slacks. A leather portfolio rested on her lap, and she was entirely engrossed in reading a dense stack of legal documents. She wasn't loud. She wasn't in the way of anyone walking normally, but she was in Voss's way. "Hey?" Voss barked, not slowing his pace. "Move it." The woman, Lorraine Vale, didn't immediately jump. She was currently reviewing the operational budget of the Oak Ridge Police Department, a budget riddled with overtime fraud and unaccounted for tactical expenditures. Hearing the sharp, disrespectful tone, she looked up, her dark eyes locking onto the badge, then moving up to Voss's flushed, irritated face. "Excuse me, officer?" Lorraine asked. Her voice was calm, steady, and devoid of the intimidation Voss was used to seeing. "I said move," Voss snapped, stopping right in front of her. He leaned in, letting his physical bulk loom over her. "This is a walkway, not a public library. Get your feet out of the aisle." Lorraine looked down. Her feet were tucked neatly against the wooden legs of the bench. She was occupying exactly the space she was entitled to. "My feet aren't in the aisle, officer. There's plenty of room for you to walk around." Voss felt a hot flash of anger prickle the back of his neck. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by a black woman in a public space. In his warped mind, her calm defiance was a direct threat to his authority. He looked around. A few people were turning their heads, watching the interaction. His ego demanded a victory. "I don't care what you think there's room for," Voss sneered, his voice dropping low, lacing his words with a toxic, condescending venom. "People like you always think the rules don't apply. You think you can just sit wherever you want, talk back to whoever you want. Get up." "I am waiting for the clerk's office to call my number," Lorraine replied, her gaze hardening into something resembling polished steel. She did not raise her voice. She did not break eye contact. "I have a right to sit here, not anymore." Without another word, Voss stepped forward and with a sharp, vicious motion, kicked the side of Lorraine's right shin. He didn't just tap her. He put the weight of his heavy steel-toed tactical boot into it. The sudden, shocking impact sent a jolt of pain up Lorraine's leg. The sheer force of the blow caused her to instinctively recoil, knocking her heavy leather portfolio off her lap. Hundreds of pages of departmental files, audits, and internal affairs reports scattered across the dirty linoleum floor in a chaotic slide of white paper. A gasp echoed from a nearby woman. A public defender stopped dead in his tracks, but nobody intervened. This was Oak Ridge, and Harlan Voss was a known commodity. Voss let out a short, ugly laugh, looking down at the papers covering the floor. "Look at that!" he mocked, a cruel smile stretching across his face. "Now you have a reason to be on the floor. Pick up your garbage and learn some respect." Lorraine did not scream. She did not cry. The pain in her shin was throbbing, a deep, bruising ache, but her mind was entirely clear. She slowly lowered herself to the floor and began gathering her papers. As she reached for a page detailing civil rights lawsuit payouts, she looked up at Voss. "Your name and badge number," Lorraine said, her voice dropping 10 degrees, echoing with a chilling authority that Voss was too arrogant to recognize. "Officer Harlan Voss, badge number 7-4-4-2," he said proudly, tapping the silver shield on his chest. "File a complaint if you want, sweetheart. Tell them Voss sent you. Let me know how that works out for you." He stepped carelessly over her scattered papers, leaving a dirty bootprint on a document outlining the new chain of command, and strutted down the hallway, laughing to himself. He felt powerful. He felt completely in control. Lorraine Vale watched him walk away. She neatly stacked the papers back into her portfolio, ignoring the stinging pain in her leg. She brushed the dust off her slacks and stood up. She didn't bother going to the clerk's office anymore. She had seen all she needed to see of the Oak Ridge Police Department's culture. She pulled a sleek smartphone from her trench coat pocket and dialed a number. "Mayor Theodore Harlan," Lorraine said when the line clicked open. "It's Vale, Lorraine. Good morning." The mayor's voice boomed enthusiastically. "Are you in town? Are you ready for the big announcement at the precinct this afternoon?" "I am," Lorraine replied softly, staring down the hallway where Voss had disappeared. "In fact, I think I'm going to make a few immediate changes to the roster." The Oak Ridge Police Department's central precinct was a sprawling, brutalist concrete building that felt more like a fortress than a public service building. During the shift change, the locker room was buzzing with the chaotic energy of officers coming and going. Lockers slammed, radios crackled with static, and the smell of cheap deodorant and stale sweat hung heavy in the air. Harlan Voss was holding court. He sat on the wooden bench in the center of the room, unlacing his tactical boots, surrounded by 3 younger officers who hung onto his every word like gospel. "I'm telling you, Reeves," Voss said, pointing a finger at a rookie named Darius Hale, "you can't give an inch out there, not an inch. They sense weakness, like today at the courthouse." "What happened at the courthouse?" Darius Hale asked, looking slightly uncomfortable but too intimidated to walk away. Voss laughed, a harsh, abrasive sound. "Some lady thought she owned the hallway, sat right in the middle, giving me lip when I told her to clear a path. You know the type, entitled, thinks the world owes her something." "So what did you do?" asked Officer Tate Maddox, leaning against a row of lockers. "I moved her," Voss said, grinning. "Gave her a little tap with the boot, sent all her little papers flying all over the floor. You should have seen the look on her face, total shock. She asked for my badge number like I give a damn." The other officers chuckled nervously, except for Darius Hale, who looked down at his boots. "Isn't that kind of risky, Voss? I mean, what if she actually files a complaint?" "Let her," Voss roared, slamming his locker shut. "Internal Affairs is run by Captain Preston Hale. We play golf every other Sunday. Nothing sticks to me, kid. Remember that. We run this city. We are the law. We don't bow to the public. The public bows to us." The intercom on the wall suddenly crackled to life, interrupting Voss's arrogant sermon. "Attention, all personnel. The mayor's briefing and the introduction of the new chief of police will begin in the main assembly room in 5 minutes. All available officers, including off-going and oncoming shifts, are required to attend. Attendance is mandatory." Groans echoed throughout the locker room. "Great," Voss muttered, adjusting his uniform shirt and checking his reflection in the mirror. "Here we go. Another suit from out of town, coming to tell us how to do our jobs." The rumors had been swirling for weeks. The previous chief had been forced into early retirement after a massive corruption scandal involving missing evidence and excessive force complaints. Mayor Theodore Harlan, desperate to save his upcoming re-election campaign, had promised to bring in an outsider, a fixer with a spotless record and a reputation for ruthlessness. Nobody at Oak Ridge knew who it was. The mayor had kept the hire tightly under wraps. Voss swaggered into the main assembly room, taking a seat in the second row. The room was packed with over 100 officers, detectives, and administrative staff. A podium stood at the front of the room, flanked by the city's flag and the department's colors. At the start of the briefing, Mayor Theodore Harlan walked onto the stage. He tapped the microphone, the feedback whining briefly before settling. "Good afternoon, Oak Ridge," the mayor began, his tone serious. The room fell silent. "We all know why we are here. The past year has been difficult for this department. Trust between law enforcement and the community is at an all-time low. We've had scandals. We've had failures of leadership. That ends today." Voss rolled his eyes, leaning back in his chair and crossing his arms. He exchanged a knowing smirk with Maddox. Politicians, he thought, all talk. "When I looked for a new chief," the mayor continued, "I didn't want someone who was going to maintain the status quo. I wanted someone who has faced down the worst kinds of corruption. Someone who served for many years in Chicago PD, rising to deputy superintendent, someone with a law degree, a master's in criminal justice, and absolutely zero tolerance for misconduct." The mayor turned toward the heavy side doors of the assembly room. "It is my profound honor to introduce the new absolute authority in this building, your new chief of police, Lorraine Vale." The side doors opened. The entire room stood up in unison, a chorus of shifting boots and rustling uniforms. Voss stood up slowly, a bored expression on his face, ready to clap politely and get out of there. He looked toward the stage. A woman walked out from the shadows of the hallway and stepped up to the podium. She was dressed in an immaculate, razor-sharp Class A uniform. The dark navy fabric was pressed perfectly. 4 shining silver stars gleamed on her collar. A gold shield rested over her heart. Voss stopped breathing. The blood drained from his face so fast he felt dizzy. His heart, which had been beating with a slow, arrogant rhythm, suddenly hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. The bored smirk vanished, replaced by a mask of absolute paralyzing terror. It was her. The beige trench coat was gone. The soft turtleneck was gone. But the face, the sharp jawline, the piercing dark eyes, the steady, unyielding expression was exactly the same. It was the woman from the courthouse hallway. The woman whose shin he had brutally kicked earlier that day. The woman whose papers he had stepped on. Chief Lorraine Vale stepped up to the microphone. She didn't look at her notes. She didn't look at the mayor. She looked out at the sea of uniforms. Slowly, deliberately, her eyes scanned the crowd. She swept past the detectives, past the lieutenants, past the rookies in the back, and then her gaze locked onto the second row. She found Harlan Voss. When her eyes met his, the temperature in the room seemed to plummet. She didn't glare. She didn't smile. Her expression was utterly devoid of warmth, calculating and cold as a winter night. She held his gaze for 3 agonizingly long seconds. In that silence, Voss felt the weight of his entire career collapsing in on him. He felt the phantom ache of his steel-toed boot hitting her leg, a memory that now felt like a death sentence. "Good afternoon," Chief Vale finally said into the microphone, her voice ringing out clear and authoritative, the exact same tone she had used when asking for his badge number. "My name is Lorraine Vale, and as of this exact moment, everything you thought you knew about how this department operates is over." Voss swallowed hard, a cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. The predator had just realized he was trapped in a cage, and the prey held the only key. The assembly room emptied in a heavy, suffocating silence. Usually, the end of a mayoral briefing was met with loud chatter, complaints about new policies, and the scuffling of boots heading toward the exits. Today, the Oak Ridge Police Department filtered out like ghosts. Officer Harlan Voss remained glued to his plastic chair in the second row, his hands resting on his duty belt, visibly trembling. His mind raced back to the hallway. He remembered the sickening thud of his steel-toed boot connecting with her shin. He remembered her calm voice asking for his badge number. He remembered laughing in her face. "She knows," he thought, panic gripping his chest. "She looked right at me. She knows exactly who I am." He waited until the room was nearly empty before standing on shaky legs. He didn't go to the locker room to change. He bypassed the front desk entirely and took the back stairwell up to the 3rd floor. He needed an ally. He needed the one man in the department who had made a career out of making officers' mistakes disappear. Voss practically kicked open the door to the Internal Affairs Division, startling a young administrative assistant. He stormed straight into the corner office of Captain Preston Hale. Hale, a heavy-set man with a flushed face and a perpetually loosened tie, looked up from his computer monitor, annoyed. "Knock, Harlan. For God's sake, people can see you." "Did you see her?" Voss gasped, closing the blinds on the glass wall of the office before turning to face the captain. "Did you see the new chief?" Yeah, I saw her. Hale scoffed, leaning back in his expensive leather chair. Vale, a political stunt by Beaumont. Bring in the tough outsider from Chicago to clean up the good old boys. She'll make a few speeches, implement some sensitivity training, and in time, she'll be behind a desk rubber stamping our reports, just like the last guy. Relax. You don't understand, Preston, Voss said, his voice cracking. He leaned over the desk, his face pale and slick with sweat. I met her today before the briefing at the courthouse. Hale frowned, sitting up slightly. Met her? What do you mean? Voss swallowed hard, tasting bile. She was sitting on the bench, blocking the hallway to the clerk's office. She wasn't in uniform. She looked like a nobody. I told her to move. She gave me attitude. Hale stared at him, the color slowly draining from his own face as he anticipated the punchline. Harlan, tell me you didn't. I kicked her. Voss whispered, the words sounding absurd and suicidal spoken out loud. I kicked her in the leg, knocked all her paperwork on the floor, and then I gave her my name and badge number and told her to file a complaint. Silence stretched across the office, heavy and toxic. Hale ran a hand down his face, letting out a long, exhausted sigh. You kicked the new chief of police, Hale summarized flatly. On her first day. I didn't know, Voss pleaded. She was in plain clothes. What is she going to do, Preston? Can you intercept the complaint? Can you bury it? Hale stood up and paced the length of his office. His mind was calculating the fallout. He and Voss had a mutually beneficial arrangement. Voss did the dirty work on the streets, enforcing their brand of control, and Hale ensured the paperwork always reflected a clean shoot or a justified use of force. If Voss went down, he might panic and drag Hale down with him. Listen to me, Hale said, pointing a thick finger at Voss. She hasn't done anything yet. If she was going to fire you publicly, she would have done it on that stage to make an example out of you. The fact that she didn't means she's either bound by union protocols or she's trying to figure out how the department works before making a move. So, what do I do? You keep your head down, Hale ordered. You do your job exactly by the book. No shakedowns, no roughing up suspects, no lip to the brass. If she files a formal complaint, it has to come across my desk. I control the internal affairs docket. I'll tie it up in administrative review for months, but you cannot give her a reason to bypass me. Do you understand? Voss nodded frantically. By the book? Yeah, okay. Meanwhile, on the top floor of the precinct, Chief Lorraine Vale sat behind the massive mahogany desk in her new office. The door was locked. She slowly rolled up the right leg of her dark navy trousers. Just below her knee, an ugly dark purple bruise the size of a baseball was already blossoming against her skin. It throbbed with a dull, constant ache. She stared at it for a long moment. It wasn't just a bruise, it was a symptom of a much deeper disease infecting Oak Ridge. Lorraine had not stayed quiet on that stage out of fear or union protocol. She stayed quiet because firing Harlan Voss for a single assault wouldn't solve the problem. If she fired him today, the police union would appeal. Captain Hale would testify to his stellar character, and Voss would be back on the streets with back pay in a year. No, Lorraine didn't just want Voss's badge. She wanted his pension. She wanted his freedom. She wanted to surgically extract the entire corrupt network that allowed a monster like him to thrive. She rolled her pant leg down, smoothed her uniform, and pressed the intercom button on her desk. Send in Detective Blake, please. A moment later, the door opened, and a sharp-eyed woman in her middle years walked in. Detective Lila Vance had a reputation that Lorraine had thoroughly vetted before arriving. Vance was a brilliant investigator, but she had been systematically marginalized by the department's boys' club. She was routinely assigned cold cases and paperwork because she refused to falsify evidence to cover for officers like Voss. "You wanted to see me, Chief?" Vance asked, standing at attention. "Sit down, Detective," Lorraine said, motioning to the chair opposite her. "I'm going to get straight to the point." I reviewed the personnel files of every officer in this precinct over the weekend. Yours stood out. You have the highest closure rate on homicides, yet you've been passed over for promotion to lieutenant 3 times. Why? Vance shifted uncomfortably. "With respect, ma'am, I think you'd have to ask Captain Hale and the promotion board. I don't need to ask them." "I know why," Lorraine said smoothly. "You arrested an off-duty officer for a DUI some time ago instead of giving him a ride home. You broke the blue wall of silence, and they have punished you for it ever since." Vance's jaw tightened, but she didn't deny it. "I did my job, and I need you to do it again." Lorraine leaned forward, steepling her fingers. "I am launching a quiet internal audit strictly off the books. I am looking into a pattern of excessive force, civil rights violations, and extortion. And the spider at the center of this web is Officer Harlan Voss." Vance's eyes widened slightly. "Voss?" "Ma'am, Voss is protected. He's Langley's golden boy. Any investigation into him goes through internal affairs, and Hale will kill it before you even see the file." "Hale won't see this file," Lorraine replied, her voice turning to ice, "because you are going to build it for me, bypassing IA entirely. I want every arrest report Voss has filed in recent years. I want to cross-reference his resisting arrest charges with hospital admission records. I want the names of every local business owner he interacts with on his beat." "Chief," Vance said slowly, realizing the gravity of what was happening, "if they find out we're doing this, they will try to ruin us, both of us." Lorraine stood up, walking around the desk. She looked out the window at the sprawling city of Oak Ridge. "Detective Vance, earlier today, Officer Voss kicked me in the leg at the courthouse because I didn't move fast enough for him. He thought I was just a citizen he could abuse without consequence." Vance gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "He assaulted you, Chief. You can arrest him right now." "If I arrest him now, I get one bad cop," Lorraine said, turning back to face her. "If we do this my way, we get them all. Are you in?" Vance looked at the new chief. For the first time in years, she felt a spark of genuine hope for the city. She stood up, squaring her shoulders. "I'm in." Some time passed. For Officer Harlan Voss, they were the most agonizing of his life. He jumped every time his radio cracked. He checked his locker daily for a pink slip. He avoided the top floor of the precinct like a plague. But as the days ticked by and nothing happened, Voss's natural arrogance began to creep back in. He hadn't been called into the chief's office. He hadn't been suspended. Captain Hale had smugly assured him that Vale was too busy dealing with the city council's budget committees to care about a minor altercation in a hallway. She's scared, Voss finally convinced himself, as he strapped on his Kevlar vest for an evening shift. She realized who runs the streets. She knows she can't touch me without the Union burning the city down. Voss walked out to his cruiser, tossing his gear into the trunk. His partner, rookie Darius Hale, was already in the driver's seat, double-checking the dash cam. "All right, kid. Let's roll," Voss said, sliding into the passenger seat and resting his boots on the dashboard. Take us down through the industrial district. We need to pay a visit to Arthur Caldwell. Darius Hale tensed. Caldwell's auto body. We don't have a call out there, Voss. It's called proactive policing, Hale, Voss sneered. Arthur's been getting sloppy. Lots of cash transactions. I want to make sure he's keeping his nose clean. In reality, Arthur Caldwell was a hard-working, middle-aged man who ran the most successful independent garage in the district. But because his business operated largely in cash, Voss had been running a protection racket on him for some time. Once a month, Voss would show up, threaten to audit Arthur's parts inventory for stolen goods, or threaten to cite him for zoning violations regarding parked cars on the street. To make him go away, Arthur would slip him cash in an unmarked envelope. It was easy money. Darius Hale drove them down to the rusted chain-link gates of Caldwell's auto body. The sun was just starting to set, casting long, dark shadows across the rows of half-repaired vehicles. Park in the back, Voss instructed, out of sight from the main road. As the cruiser rolled to a stop, Voss reached up to his chest and pressed the button on his body camera. A small beep indicated the device was powered down. Turn yours off, Voss ordered Darius Hale. Voss, the new policy chief Vale put out says we can't. I said, turn it off, rookie, Voss barked, glaring at the younger man. Unless you want me to write you up for insubordination, we're having a private conversation with a business owner. It's a technical malfunction, got it? Reluctantly, Darius Hale reached up and powered down his camera. Voss climbed out of the car, strutting toward the open garage doors. The familiar smell of motor oil and metallic dust filled the air. Arthur Caldwell was wiping his hands on a greased rag near a lifted Chevy. When he saw Voss approach, his shoulders slumped. Officer Voss, Arthur said, his voice tight, we're closed. You're never closed to the Oak Ridge PD, Artie. Voss smiled, a predatory gleam in his eye. He walked around the Chevy casually, kicking one of the tires. Place looks busy. Lots of inventory. You got the proper receipts for all these catalytic converters? You know I do, Arthur said, taking a step back as Voss invaded his personal space. I don't know anything, Artie, Voss whispered, crowding the man against the side of the car. What I do know is that a city inspector could come down here tomorrow, shut off your power, and lock your gates while they investigate a tip about stolen property. That would cost you thousands. It would be a real shame. Arthur looked down at the concrete floor. I don't have the envelope today, Voss. Business has been slow. I have a mortgage. Voss's face darkened. The brief flash of anger he felt in the courthouse hallway returned. He grabbed Arthur by the collar of his greasy overalls and shoved him hard against the side of the truck. I don't give a damn about your mortgage, Voss hissed. You pay the tax or I shut you down. Have it by tomorrow night or I'm putting you in handcuffs for resisting arrest. Are we clear? Voss let go, smoothing his uniform shirt as Arthur coughed, nodding frantically. Good man. Voss smiled, turning around to walk back to the cruiser. He felt invincible. He had his power back. The new chief hadn't changed a thing. Oak Ridge was still his playground. He climbed back into the cruiser, completely oblivious to the fact that his entire career had just been signed away. Inside the small, cluttered back office of the garage, the blinds were drawn. Sitting in the dark, bathed in the glow of a high-definition surveillance monitor, was Detective Lila Vance. Next to her sat a technician from the FBI's regional field office. The monitor displayed a crystal-clear 4K video feed of the garage floor, captured from a camera hidden inside a smoke detector. Another feed showed the audio waveform, having recorded every single word Voss just said through a parabolic microphone hidden in a stack of tires. Vance pressed a button on her secure radio. Chief Vale, we have it. Clear audio and video of extortion, assault, and premeditated tampering with departmental equipment. He forced the rookie to shut down his camera. Miles away in her office, Chief Lorraine Vale stood looking out her window at the city lights. A cold, satisfied smile crossed her face. She had spent some time quietly utilizing her federal contacts, pulling favors to secure a localized federal wiretap warrant that entirely bypassed the local judges in Oak Ridge, who were friendly with Captain Hale. "Excellent work, Detective," Lorraine said softly into her phone. "Secure the files onto an encrypted drive. Do not log them into the precinct's evidence room. Bring them directly to my house." "And Voss?" Vance asked. Lorraine's eyes narrowed, reflecting the distant city lights. Let him sleep soundly tonight. Let him think he won. Tomorrow morning, we don't just spring the trap, we burn down the whole forest. The next morning broke over Oak Ridge with a deceptive calmness. The sky, a brilliant, cloudless blue. Officer Harlan Voss swaggered into the precinct, holding a large iced coffee, feeling like a king, surveying his domain. Last night's collection from Arthur Caldwell's garage had been a resounding success. The envelope of cash was currently sitting in a lockbox in Voss's basement, tax-free and untraceable. As he walked through the bullpen, Voss slapped a few shoulders, laughed too loudly at a stale joke, and completely ignored the tense, electric undercurrent humming through the administrative staff. He was untouchable. The new chief hadn't made a single move against him. The incident at the courthouse was ancient history in his mind, a momentary blip of disrespect that he had correctly put down. At the start of the shift, the precinct's overhead PA system crackled to life. It wasn't the usual dispatcher's voice. It was the sharp, commanding tone of Detective Lila Vance. "Attention. Captain Preston Hale, Officer Harlan Voss, and Officer Darius Hale report to Interrogation Room A immediately. This is not a request." Voss stopped dead in his tracks, his coffee cup pausing halfway to his mouth. He looked across the bullpen and locked eyes with rookie Darius Hale, whose face had instantly drained of all color. Darius Hale looked like he was about to be physically sick. "Relax, kid," Voss muttered, walking over to him. "It's probably just a routine debrief on that warehouse burglary from last week. Keep your mouth shut. Let me do the talking. Hale will be there. We're golden." They made their way down the sterile, fluorescent-lit corridor toward the interrogation wing. When they arrived at Room A, Captain Preston Hale was already standing outside, looking irritable and nervously adjusting his tie. "What is this, Preston?" Voss asked in a low whisper. "I don't know," Hale snapped. "Vance bypassed my desk to call this. Vale must have put her up to it. Just remember, deny, deflect, and demand union representation if they start asking about procedural stuff. I am the head of internal affairs. They can't discipline you without my signature." Hale pushed the heavy metal door open. The room was not set up for a routine debrief. The metal table in the center had been pushed against the wall. Standing in the center of the room is Chief Lorraine Vale, her uniform immaculate, her posture radiating absolute authority. To her right stood Detective Lila Vance, holding a thick, securely bound manila folder. But it was the man standing to Vale's left that made the blood freeze in Captain Hale's veins. He was wearing a sharp, tailored charcoal suit, and a badge was clipped to his belt, a badge that did not belong to the Oak Ridge Police Department. "Gentlemen," Chief Vale said, her voice dropping the temperature in the room by 10 degrees. "Close the door." Voss stepped inside, his bravado rapidly evaporating as the heavy steel door clicked shut behind them, sealing them in. "Allow me to introduce Special Agent Marcus Riley of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Public Corruption Task Force," Vale said smoothly, gesturing to the man in the suit. Riley didn't smile. He merely gave a slow, predatory nod. Haley immediately went on the offensive, puffing out his chest. "Chief Vale, what is the meaning of this? If this is an internal affairs matter regarding my officers, protocol dictates that I lead the inquiry. You cannot bring federal agents into my precinct without briefing me first." "You are gravely mistaken about two things, Captain Hale," Vale replied, stepping forward. The dark, unyielding intensity in her eyes made Hale instinctively take a half step back. "First, this is no longer your precinct, and second, this is not an internal affairs matter. This is a federal criminal investigation." Voss felt a cold bead of sweat roll down his spine. He glanced at Darius Hale, who was now trembling visibly. "Investigating what?" Voss demanded, trying to inject his usual gravelly authority into his voice, though it cracked slightly. "We haven't done anything. We've been out there keeping the city safe." "Keeping it safe," Vale repeated, a dangerously soft edge to her voice. She turned to Detective Vance. "Detective, would you please show Officer Voss how he keeps our city safe?" Vance pressed a button on a remote control. The large, flat-screen monitor mounted on the wall hummed to life. The screen displayed a crystal-clear, high-definition, full-color video. It was Arthur Caldwell's auto body shop. The angle was from above, looking down at the garage floor. The audio kicked in, painfully loud and perfectly clear, captured by the hidden parabolic microphone. I said, "Turn it off, rookie, unless you want me to write you up for insubordination. We're having a private conversation with a business owner. It's a technical malfunction. Got it?" Voss's own voice echoed off the concrete walls of the interrogation room. He felt the air get sucked right out of his lungs. He stared at the screen in abject horror as the video played out his entire extortion of Arthur Caldwell. Every shove, every threat about city inspectors, every demand for the tax, it was all there, indisputable, devastating. "You pay the tax, or I shut you down. Have it by tomorrow night, or I'm putting you in handcuffs for resisting arrest. Are we clear?" The video paused on Voss's smiling, arrogant face as he walked away from the terrified mechanic. The silence in the interrogation room was deafening. It was the sound of a career built on bullying and corruption evaporating into thin air. "That's..." Voss stammered, his mind racing desperately for a lifeline. "That's an illegal recording. You can't use that. We were inside a private business. You need a warrant for audio surveillance. That's fruit of the poisonous tree." Captain Hale jumped on the lifeline. "He's right, Chief. If you planted a bug without a judge's sign-off, this whole thing is inadmissible. And as head of IA, I am formally throwing this evidence out." Agent Marcus Riley finally spoke, his voice dry and laced with contempt. "You're not throwing anything out, Captain, because you don't have the clearance to even look at the paperwork." Riley reached into his inner suit pocket and pulled out a folded document, tossing it onto the metal table. "Title 3, Wiretap Warrant," Riley stated. "Authorized under the Hobbs Act for extortion, under color of official right. Signed by Federal Magistrate Judge Thomas Patrick. It completely bypasses local jurisdiction, local courts, and your corrupt little internal affairs department. It's airtight, Officer Voss. We own you." Voss staggered back until his shoulders hit the cinder block wall. His chest heaved as panic truly set in. He looked at Hale, but the captain was staring at the federal warrant on the table with wide, terrified eyes. Hale knew a sinking ship when he saw one, and he was already trying to figure out how to scramble for a lifeboat. Chief Vale slowly walked over to Voss, stopping just inches from him. The height difference didn't matter. Her presence completely dwarfed him. 2 weeks ago, Officer Voss, Vale said, her voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm whisper, you assaulted me in the Monroe County Courthouse. You kicked a black woman sitting quietly on a bench because you felt entitled to the space she occupied. You thought I was a nobody. You thought you were a god. Voss couldn't look her in the eye. He stared at her silver collar brass, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps. If I had fired you that day, Vale continued, Captain Hale would have buried the report. The Union would have fought for your reinstatement, and Arthur Caldwell and dozens of people just like him would still be paying your extortion tax. So, I let you think you won. I let you think you got away with it because I didn't want to just break your pride, Voss. I wanted to break your entire world. She turned slightly, locking her gaze onto rookie Darius Hale. The young officer jumped. Officer Hale, Vale said sharply, you turned off your body camera last night. That makes you an accessory to Hobbs Act extortion, conspiracy to commit civil rights violations, and witness tampering. The federal mandatory minimum for those charges combined is 15 years in a federal penitentiary. Darius Hale let out a choked sob, tears spilling over his eyelashes. Chief, please. He made me do it. He told me if I didn't play ball, I'd never make it past my probationary period. He said Captain Hale would fire me. Shut up, Hale, Voss roared, a desperate cornered animal lashing out. Don't say another word. You don't give orders anymore, Harlan, Vale snapped, her voice cracking like a whip. She looked back at Darius Hale. Agent Riley and I are offering you exactly one chance to save your life. Officer Hale, you will sit down with the FBI right now. You will detail every single shakedown, every falsified arrest report, and every time Captain Hale helped cover up Voss's crimes. If you hold back a single detail, you go to federal prison with him. I'll do it, Darius Hale cried instantly, nodding his head so fast it looked painful. I'll tell you everything. I have dates written down in my personal notebook. I'll give it all to you. Hale, you rat! Preston Hale yelled, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. He pointed a shaking finger at Chief Vale. You can't do this. I am a decorated captain. You have no proof that I knew anything about this. Actually, Preston, we do, Agent Marcus Riley said, stepping in front of Hale, because Detective Vance also secured a warrant for your personal bank accounts. We found the offshore LLC, where Voss has been depositing a 20% kickback from his street collections. You aren't just covering for him, Captain. You're his business partner. Hale's mouth opened, but no sound came out. His knees buckled slightly, and he had to grab the edge of the metal table to keep from collapsing. The architect of Oak Ridge's corruption had just been checkmated by the woman he thought was merely a political prop. Captain Hale, Vale said, her voice devoid of any pity, you're hereby stripped of your police powers, suspended without pay, and remanded into the custody of the FBI pending federal racketeering charges. Riley signaled, and 2 more federal agents stepped into the room from the hallway, smoothly placing Captain Hale in handcuffs and reading him his Miranda rights. Voss watched his ultimate protector get hauled out of the room like a common street thug. He was entirely alone. There was no Union rep coming to save him. There was no judge he could buy off. The hallway incident, that one arrogant, cruel, racist decision to kick a woman he deemed beneath him, had triggered an avalanche that had just buried his entire life. Chief Vale turned her full, unrelenting focus back to Voss. "Officer Harlan Voss," she said, every word dripping with the heavy weight of justice long denied, "for extortion, assault under color of authority, intimidation, and civil rights violations, give me your badge and your gun." Voss's hands shook violently. He slowly reached down to his duty belt. He unsnapped the holster, drawing his service weapon, and placed it on the metal table. Then, with agonizing slowness, he unpinned the silver shield from his chest, the shield he had used as a weapon against the vulnerable for some time, and set it next to the gun. "Turn around," Detective Vance ordered, stepping forward with a pair of heavy steel handcuffs. Voss turned and placed his hands behind his back. The cold metal clamped down on his wrists, ratcheting tight with a sharp metallic click that echoed through the room. "You're making a mistake," Voss whispered, though all the venom was gone from his voice. He just sounded broken. "I gave years to this city." "No, Voss," Chief Vale corrected him, stepping aside to let Vance lead him toward the door. "You took years from this city. Today, we take it back." As Voss was perp, walked out of the interrogation room, through the bullpen, and past the shocked stares of dozens of his fellow officers, he finally understood the woman in the courthouse hallway hadn't been an obstacle in his path. She had been the brick wall he had been speeding toward his entire corrupt career, and the impact had utterly destroyed him. Chief Lorraine Vale stood in the doorway of the interrogation room, watching Voss disappear into the back of a federal transport vehicle. She reached down and briefly rubbed her right shin, where the phantom ache of the bruise still lingered. The pain was still there, but as she looked around the precinct, now painfully aware that a new standard had just been ruthlessly enforced, the air in Oak Ridge suddenly felt a little bit cleaner. The reckoning had come, and justice was finally sitting in the big chair. In the time that followed, the air inside the United States District Court felt entirely different from the humid, chaotic county courthouse where Harlan Voss had once played God. Here, the mahogany walls absorbed the sound. The ceilings were vaulted and intimidating, and the federal seal behind the judge's bench served as a silent, heavy reminder of absolute authority. Harlan Voss sat at the defense table. He was no longer wearing his crisp, heavily starched tactical uniform. He wore a faded, oversized orange jumpsuit issued by the Federal Detention Center. He had lost weight. His skin was pale, his posture slumped. Without his badge, his gun, and the blind backing of a corrupt union, he looked remarkably small. He looked exactly like the terrified defendants he used to laugh at. The trial had been a bloodbath. Voss had foolishly refused a plea deal early on, arrogant enough to believe that a jury of his peers would somehow sympathize with the tough realities of policing. He was wrong. Assistant United States Attorney Victoria Lang had systematically dismantled his defense. She didn't just play the 4K video of him extorting Arthur Caldwell. She paraded a line of witnesses to the stand. Rookie Darius Hale, desperate to avoid a lengthy prison sentence, had testified for hours, detailing every illegal shakedown, every fabricated arrest report, and the toxic culture of fear Voss had cultivated. Even worse for Voss, Captain Preston Hale, the man who had sworn to protect him, had flipped. Facing his own crushing racketeering charges, Hale had handed the FBI the financial ledgers, proving that Voss's street extortion was part of a larger organized criminal enterprise. Judge Theodore Harlan, a man known for his zero-tolerance policy on public corruption, looked down at Voss over his reading glasses. The courtroom was dead silent. In the second row of the gallery, sitting quietly and taking notes, was Chief Lorraine Vale. "Mr. Voss," Judge Theodore Harlan began, his voice echoing like thunder in the large room. "In my years on the bench, I have rarely seen a more egregious abuse of the public trust. You were given a badge to protect the vulnerable. Instead, you weaponized it to terrorize them. You operated under the delusion that the law did not apply to you, that the uniform you wore was a shield against accountability." Voss stared at the polished wooden table. He couldn't bring himself to look at the gallery. He couldn't look at Arthur Caldwell, who was sitting with his wife, and he absolutely could not look at Chief Vale. "Your actions have not only destroyed your own life, but have deeply fractured the community's trust in the Oak Ridge Police Department," the judge continued. "Consequently, under the federal sentencing guidelines for Hobbs Act extortion and civil rights violations, I am sentencing you to a lengthy term in federal prison." Voss closed his eyes as a collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Furthermore, Judge Theodore Harlan stated, striking the final lethal blow to Voss's ego, "As your crimes were committed under color of official right, you are hereby stripped of your municipal pension. The funds from that pension will be liquidated to pay immediate court-ordered restitution to Arthur Caldwell and the other business owners you systematically robbed." The gavel came down with a sharp shot echoing crack. It was over. The hard karma had finally circled back. Voss had kicked a woman in a hallway to make himself feel big, and in return, he had lost his freedom, his career, his finances, and his future. As the federal marshals approached to take him away, Voss was forced to stand and turn towards the gallery. For a brief, agonizing second, his eyes met Lorraine Vale. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply gave him a slow, acknowledging nod, a silent confirmation that the debt he incurred in that county courthouse hallway had been paid in full. Then she closed her leather portfolio, stood up, and walked out of the courtroom. She had a city to run. Back at the Oak Ridge precinct, the atmosphere had fundamentally changed. The oppressive boys' club culture that had suffocated good cops for some time was dead. Chief Lorraine Vale stood in the main assembly room, the exact same room where she had shocked Voss some time ago. The officers were standing at attention, but this time the fear was gone, replaced by a cautious, growing respect. "Today, we close a dark chapter in this department's history," Chief Vale announced into the microphone. "We are no longer an occupying force. We are public servants, and to ensure that the blue wall of silence remains permanently dismantled, I'm officially promoting Lila Vance to the rank of captain. She will be taking over the newly restructured Internal Affairs Division." A genuine wave of applause broke out across the room. Captain Vance stepped forward, accepting her new brass. The officers who had kept their heads down for some time finally felt like they could breathe. The predators had been purged. Later that afternoon, Chief Vale walked through the front doors of the Monroe County Courthouse to file a standard budgetary brief. She walked down the same long, echoing corridor. It was still crowded with public defenders, nervous families, and exhausted citizens. A young officer was walking briskly down the hall, holding a stack of files. A civilian was sitting on a bench, their feet slightly extending into the walkway. Vale paused, watching. The officer didn't shout. He didn't kick. He simply smiled, stepped around the civilian, and said, "Excuse me, sir? Have a good afternoon." Chief Lorraine Vale smiled, clutching her portfolio, and kept walking. The system wasn't perfect yet, but the rot had been cut out. Justice wasn't just a word in Oak Ridge anymore. It was the new reality. The fall of Officer Harlan Voss is a chilling reminder that arrogance is a fragile armor, and absolute power is an illusion that can be shattered in an instant. He thought he was untouchable, but he failed to realize that true authority doesn't shout, bully, or kick people when they're down. True authority observes, builds a flawless case, and strikes when you least expect it. Chief Vale didn't just fire a bad cop. She surgically dismantled a corrupt system, proving that nobody, no matter how protected they feel, is above the law.